Welcome to the Dreams of Consciousness podcast. If you would be so kind, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, my name is Patrick Murphy. I am part of the musical group The Oracle.
And how would you describe the music of the Oracle?
I would say it's definitely dark, sometimes ritualistic, electronic based, sort of like a journey through the senses.
Dark, ritualistic, electronic based. Would you compare it to any other bands?
I would say if you're into stuff like Sun, Tangerine Dream, Swans, the more atmospheric stuff from Nine Inch Nails. Those are some of the bigger influences, and I think we draw similar sounds to those bands.
So let's talk a little bit about the history of the project. When was it put together?
The idea came together in probably 2014, and then very early on in 2015 is when I actually started recording material, and then about a year later is when it sort of fleshed together to become what it is now.
Now, you mentioned collaborators. Is the Oracle a full band, or is it you with a few guest musicians?
So it's me, but when I started doing it, the first recording was different collaborators. The second recording I did was different collaborators. I released a few singles that were with the same collaborators on the first EP once I had it all. And then I released 2 ambient tracks that were just me. And then this new record I have coming out is really the work of myself, Zach Weeks, who produced the album, and a few people I collaborate with other bands too. So, Jesse Menard was a collaborator. He plays in the band Mountain Man with me. And then the other person who really helped form the sound, who's still working with me today, his name is Cosmo DiGiulio, and he's really helped kind of give me the sound that we have now. So I guess speaking in current terms, it's Cosmo and myself.
And would you say that the music has changed from the earliest releases to now?
Yeah, absolutely. The first cassette I put out, it was more of a noise album, I would say. Influenced by stuff like Merzbow, Throbbing Gristle, stuff like that. And then the EP I mentioned before, once I had it all, that started to go into to where we are now. It was still a bit more noisy. A lot of it was improv, influenced by like the later Scott Walker records. And then, as I worked with those 2 collaborators a little bit more, it formed into, it had more like actual like beats to it and some melodic qualities. And then I think with this latest release, it's sort of like an amalgam of all the eras of what I was trying to do with the Oracle. And this, I feel like it's less noisy, more structured, and I guess more listenable.
Now, was there a particular impetus or reason why you went in this more structured, more melodic direction?
Honestly, it's because I figured out how to use the instruments I had a little bit better. When I first started playing live, even I just had some guitar effects pedals running and a tape deck running. And then as I got more involved in synthesis, I acquired a lot of analog synths. I started getting into Eurorack synths. So I think it was just each release was me sort of figuring out the instrument a little more. Because, if anybody knows me as a musician, I'm a drummer. I've been playing drums in bands for almost 20 years at this point. And then I got into guitar effect pedals and synthesis within the last couple of years. So, like I said, it was just me kind of figuring it out and learning the instrument more.
So let's jump into the album. Is this considered your first album?
I would consider it my first proper album. I released a 2-song cassette when I first started doing the project. we released the EP I mentioned before. That was essentially 4 songs. I think, if I remember correctly, I honestly haven't listened to it in such a long time, but I think it was 4 songs broken into different movements. This I would say is my first proper full length.
Your upcoming album is called Hypogeum, and it's set to be released on August 14th. You talked a little bit about the differences between this album and your previous releases. Tell me a little bit about the writing and the concept behind the album.
So I had the concept of the album before I even set foot in the studio. That I got the idea. There's the Hypogeum in Malta, that it was discovered in the early 1900s, 1902, I believe. And, it was a 3,500-year-old structure that they found underground. And, it was like a temple where the people, held rituals. And there was this one room in particular called the Oracle Room, or the Oracle Chamber, depending on what source you look at. And within that room, the way that the acoustics were set up, everything rang at a certain frequency, 111 hertz. And in writing, that is called the holy frequency, or the divine frequency. So that frequency has been known to create out-of-body experiences. Some people believe that the people who built the Hypogeum were using the sound waves to move objects, move space and time. And that really, I feel like that echoed with what I've kind of been trying to do with this project since I started it, is to give people a spiritual release, out of body experiences, or, maybe even used for astral projection, or some kind of literal physical feeling from the music. And as soon as I heard about that, I was just sitting on that concept, and I was like, I need to make this an Oracle record in some way or another. So that's what the concept was built on. In terms of writing, I had skeletons of the songs that I had worked out on my own. And then when I got into the studio with Zach Weeks, who I mentioned earlier, he really helped me shape them into constructed songs, not just fragments of ideas that I had. And I would credit him to really helping the songs follow the melodic path, be a bit more structured, and also follow a theme musically. Because if you listen to the record closely, you'll hear a lot of repeated phrases and different patterns and stuff that happen all throughout the record. So he kind of helped me bring it all to life.
So not only is there an overarching theme to the album, but in terms of composition, there are recurring musical themes. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Cool. So you mentioned Zach Weeks. The album was recorded at God City. I think most people know God City through the Converge connection. God City is Kurt Ballew's studio. But tell me about working with Zach. He's not just a producer and an engineer. He's in a number of bands from the New England area.
Yeah, so I've known Zach for a really long time. We're both part of like the Massachusetts hardcore scene. We run in the same circle of friends, and we've both played in numerous bands that have shared the stage before. And I did a session with him with a friend of mine a few years before, and I really liked working with him. Like I said, I knew him through playing shows and stuff, but I didn't really know him on like a deeply personal level, the way that I consider him a friend now. So after working with him at a different studio on another session that I played drums on, I really liked his work ethic. I liked his input. He's an incredibly talented musician, so he has a lot of really good ideas that I don't think the record would exist the way it does without his help. him working at God City also kind of made it easier for me. I've known Kurt Ballou for a few years too, and through knowing the two of them, it was kind of easy to get into that studio and make it happen.
Would it be fair to say that instead of just an engineer role or just recording the album, Zach was a collaborator himself?
Yeah, absolutely. Most of the time, it was just the two of us in the studio shooting ideas back and forth, and it was great. That was really the first time that I had worked in a setting like that where we weren't really, influenced by any outside people. If we liked an idea, we would keep it. If we didn't like it, we would vocalize it. And like I said earlier, the album wouldn't exist in the way it does without Zach's help.
How long did it take for this album to come together?
So the first we broke it into two sessions. The first session, I think, so our plan was to be able to pump out a song a day, and that kind of worked. So the first session was, I think, about 6 days in a row, and then for a while I was just sitting on the record trying to figure out what to do with it. And then my friend Cosmo, who I mentioned earlier, he had just moved back to New England from New York. He and I had played in bands together. He's one of my best friends, and by the time he came back, I had a new vision of what I wanted to do with the record. So I think we spent another probably 3 or 4 days back at the studio with Zach, and really, we took a listen to the sessions we had done, thought about things we wanted to change, and then had Cosmo's input too, which was very valuable. So I mean, I guess altogether it was 2 weeks, but it was a few months between recording sessions. So it was kind of cool to do it that way too, because like I said, I could kind of sit on the songs a little bit and see exactly what I wanted to do with them.
And most of the recording was done in the middle of last year, right?
Yeah. It was. We did it March of 2019, and then we finished it up in November of 2019.